4 plays. That's all it took for one of the NFL's longest running debates to explode into the mainstream. When Aaron Rodgers stepped onto the field for his New York Jets debut in September 2023, it was supposed to mark the beginning of a Super Bowl chase. Instead, 4 offensive snaps later, the 4-time MVP was lying on the turf with a torn Achilles. Almost immediately, fans stopped asking what went wrong with the Jets. Instead, they asked a much bigger question. Was it the field itself becoming football's biggest opponent? For decades, artificial turf has divided the NFL. Players have insisted it's more dangerous. Owners have defended it as a practical choice for a billion-dollar stadium. The league has repeatedly argued the science isn't conclusive. Then came superstar injuries, public backlash, FIFA's arrival, and one of the biggest labor debates in modern football. Here are the 7 controversies that transformed a playing surface into one of the NFL's biggest battles. Most fans think the turf debate is about injuries. In reality, it's becoming a labor negotiation. The NFL's current collective bargaining agreement runs through 2030, and playing surfaces have quietly become one of the league's newest bargaining chips. In late 2025, the NFL and the NFLPA reached an interim agreement requiring every new field installed from 2026 onward to come from an approved list of standardized surfaces. By 2028, every team must comply. At first glance, that sounded like a major victory for players. It wasn't. The agreement doesn't require natural grass. Teams are still free to choose turf, provided it meets the league's new standards. Many analysts believe that's no accident. Instead of voluntarily switching to grass today, owners may prefer saving the issue for the next round of CBA negotiations, where it can become something the NFLPA has to negotiate for rather than receive for free. That means the biggest turf battle may not happen on Sundays. It could happen across a negotiating table. If you follow this debate, you've probably noticed something strange. Everyone has data, and everyone thinks they are right. The NFL has consistently pushed back against the idea of artificial turf is significantly more dangerous than natural grass. League executive Jeff Miller even pointed to injury statistics showing MetLife Stadium ranked among the better venues in 2024 for lower extremity injuries. The NFLPA tells a completely different story. Rather than looking at overall injuries, the union focuses on non-contact injuries like ACL tears, Achilles ruptures, and high ankle sprains. Independent analysts studying league-wide trends have found those injuries occurring more frequently on synthetic surfaces. That's what makes this debate so complicated. Years later, football still hasn't found an answer everyone accepts. If nearly every player prefers grass, why hasn't the NFL simply switched? The answer has very little to do with football. Modern NFL stadiums are no longer just sports venues, they're entertainment businesses. Every concert, soccer match, college football game, and monster truck rally generates additional revenue. Artificial turf survives those events far better than natural grass, while requiring significantly less maintenance throughout the year. Former Patriots safety Devin McCourty explained it perfectly. Owners aren't just thinking about 17 home games, they're thinking about everything else that happens inside the stadium. Ironically, every NFL team already practices on natural grass somewhere within its own facilities. Owners clearly understand its benefits, but game day stadiums operate under a completely different financial model. Players don't receive most of the money generated by those extra events. They do, however, play on the surface that makes those events possible, and that's where business and player safety begin colliding. Then came the twist that nobody inside the NFL saw coming. It wasn't another superstar injury, it wasn't another medical study, it was FIFA. When the preparations began for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, the governing body made one thing perfectly clear. Every match would be played on natural grass. There were no compromises and no exceptions. That meant several NFL stadiums that normally use artificial turf, including MetLife, SoFi Stadium, AT&T Stadium, Gillette Stadium, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Lumen Field, and NRG Stadium, had to replace their synthetic surfaces with grass. Almost overnight, the argument that elite grass was too difficult or too expensive became much harder to defend. Gillette Stadium even installed a carefully maintained Kentucky bluegrass and perennial rye blend cut to FIFA's exact specifications, proving just how much precision was possible when there was enough motivation. Players couldn't help but notice the contradiction. George Kittle joked that the World Cup grass looked so good the NFL should simply leave it there. Giants lineman Jermaine Illuminor admitted it was frustrating watching his home stadium receive a pristine grass surface for soccer, knowing it would soon be replaced by turf again for football. For years, players have been told grass wasn't practical. FIFA didn't argue, it simply made it happen, and in doing so, it changed the entire conversation. Long before the league and the union were debating statistics, the players themselves had already made up their minds. Aaron Rodgers' injury became the tipping point. Within hours of the game, former Packers teammate David Bakhtiari publicly challenged the NFL, asking how many more players need to get hurt before the league finally acted. He also pointed out the irony that the same stadiums would soon be replacing their turf with grass for World Cup soccer. The frustration didn't stop there. Eagles cornerback Darius Slay openly called MetLife's field trash, saying everybody around the league already knew its reputation. After Giants receiver Malik Neighbors suffered a season-ending knee injury in 2025, Odell Beckham Jr. once again called the NFL to eliminate artificial turf entirely. Packers running back Josh Jacobs added to his own criticism after tweaking his knee on the same field. One anonymous NFL executive told ESPN that some players had become genuinely nervous about playing at MetLife, suggesting they'd rather sit out with lingering injuries than risk making them worse on a field they no longer trusted. Whether those fears are supported by science is still debated, but perception has power. Once enough players believe a field is dangerous, every new injury reinforces that belief. Before Aaron Rodgers, there was Odell Beckham Jr. During Super Bowl LVI, Beckham looked unstoppable. He already caught a touchdown and appeared destined to become one of the biggest stories of the game. Then, while running a crossing route, he planted his foot to change direction. Nobody touched him. His knee simply gave out. The torn ACL immediately became one of the most replayed moments from the Super Bowl, not just because of the injury itself, but because it looked like the kind of non-contact injury players had warned about for years. Because the injury happened during the biggest game in football, millions of fans who had never thought about playing surfaces suddenly found themselves asking the same question players have been asking for years. Could the field itself be part of the problem? If Beckham started the conversation, Aaron Rodgers turned it into the biggest controversy in football. On September 11, 2023, Rodgers made his long-awaited debut for the New York Jets. The excitement lasted exactly 4 offensive plays. Trying to spin away from Buffalo Bills pass rusher Leonard Floyd, Rodgers planted his left foot before collapsing with the torn Achilles. Slow motion replay showed his calf visibly ripple moments before the tendon gave away. The irony was impossible to ignore. Only weeks earlier, Rodgers had praised MetLife's newly installed field turf core surface, calling it one of the better artificial fields he played on while still admitting he'd always preferred grass. Jets head coach Robert Saleh resisted blaming the field, arguing the injury resulted from contact rather than a non-contact cut. Medical experts were equally divided, with some pointing to Rodgers' age, his previous calf strain, and the natural mechanics of an Achilles injury instead of the turf itself. But public opinion had already moved on. He became the face of an argument that had been building for decades. His injury reignited the NFLPA's campaign for high-quality natural grass, intensified player criticism of artificial surfaces, and turned MetLife into the league's most scrutinized stadium every time another major injury occurred there. Whether the turf caused Rodgers' injury may never be answered with complete certainty, but it changed the debate forever. Maybe artificial turf isn't responsible for every torn ACL, maybe natural grass won't eliminate injuries either. The science continues to evolve and the data remains divided. But after Rodgers, Beckham, years of frustration, and FIFA's World Cup conversations, one fact is impossible to ignore. When the world's biggest sporting event demanded natural grass, the NFL found a way to build it. The technology exists, the expertise exists, the money exists. So today's debate isn't really about whether grass is possible. It's about priorities, because every stadium tells a story about what matters most. And as the NFL moves towards its next collective bargaining agreement in 2030, the biggest battle in football may not be between two teams on Sunday. It may be over the ground they're standing on.